Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Kings, the 18th chapter. And as a continuation from the 17th chapter, right, we dealt with a couple of situations, right, that happened there, notably the deportation of the northern kingdom from their land and the importation of the heathens into that land. So here we are, 2 Kings, the 18th chapter, and now we start to see how the southern kingdom was affected by the Assyrian rule, right? Because remember, as I showed in the lesson, right, let's look up the Neo-Assyrian Empire. I think this was the image that I used. Get a close-up on that, right? So remember, as you see on this map here, they conquered this whole region. So if they got Samaria and the regions above, of course, Judah or Israel would also be somewhat affected by it, right? Now you can see here that it's highlighted, not in 100% green, and part of the reason, we will see in the subsequent chapters. So this is 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 1. Hezekiah reigns over Judah. Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. So when he came into power, right, he reigned for a couple of years before the siege of Samaria, okay, ending up resulting in the northern kingdom being taken up out of there. Verse 3, and he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord Yahweh, according to all that David his father did. So Hezekiah was one of the righteous kings, right, you would say. He removed the high places and brake the images and cut down the groves and brake in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense unto it, or incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan. So Hezekiah's reform, right, you could call it, he went to the extent of tearing down the high places, the idols, the groves, all of those things. He basically abolished from the land. And here we find out that you had Israelites that were worshiping the brazen serpent that Moses had built, going back to the wilderness. All right, and I believe at that time he had mentioned, right, those that looked upon it, were spared, right, survived with the snakes, the serpents that were biting people. But as you can see here, they turned that into a degree of sacrificing and worshiping this brazen serpent, which was basically going off. And so he ended up having that broken up and destroyed as well. And I believe when you look into this word Nehushtan, right, let's take a look here. It should be Nachashatan. Let's see. Nachashatan. And you can see here it says, a thing of brass, named by which the brazen serpent made by Moses in the wilderness was worshipped in the time of King Hezekiah of Judah before he destroyed it. That's some interesting information over there. So far Hezekiah is doing pretty good. He trusted in the Lord Yahweh, God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any that were before him. For he clave unto the Lord Yahweh, and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments, which the Lord Yahweh commanded Moses. And the Lord Yahweh was with him, and he prospered whithersoever he went forth. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria and served him not. So remember, the Assyrians had the rule, the dominion in the land, right, in the region. And the neighboring nations, even including Samaria and so on, paid tribute to the Assyrians. However, at some point, King Hezekiah rebelled and decided to stop paying that tribute. Now, it's not entirely clear under which Assyrian king this was, right? Because we know when we look at secular history, right, you have, at this point, you had like Shalmaneser, right? He ends up dying pretty quickly, if not during the siege of Samaria. And then you have Sargon II, followed by Sennacherib, right? But I think as we actually go down in the chapter and we read about Sennacherib's, one of his generals who he sends, that sort of clarifies, I guess it would be during the reign of Sennacherib that Hezekiah rebelled. He smote the Philistines, even unto Gaza, and the borders thereof, from the tower of the watchmen to the fenced city. And it came to pass, because keep in mind, right, all throughout, as we read about, you had the Philistines, which were really around the coast, right, where you have the Gaza Strip and so on. And there was just back and forth. Sometimes they would invade, they would take some of our cities, then we would take some of our, and it was just back and forth. Same thing that the Syrians did, and even to the extent of the Edomites, right, ending up taking that, I forgot the name of the region, I think it was Elath, but we read about it in one of the previous chapters. So he ends up whooping their ass, right, whooping their arse. Where are we? Right, verse 9. And it came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years they took it, even in the 6th year of Hezekiah, that is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. Now you might wonder, why does it say that there was a siege of 3 years, right? At the end of 3 years, they took Samaria. And yet it says that the siege came during the 4th year of Hezekiah into his 6th year, right? That's about 2 years. But you can imagine if you have a scenario, right, where you have, say, maybe the beginning of the 4th year, right, into the 5th year, into this maybe like the ending of the 6th year, right, or something along those lines. You know, you could be close to 3 years. Or another way you could look at it is that maybe the siege that lasted 3 years wasn't 3 full years, right? Either or doesn't really help to get too caught up in the dates of this. The order of events here is what matters, which was the fact that Shalmaneser, the Assyrian king, besieged Samaria, ends up taking it after 2 to 3 years. Right here, the scriptures say 3 years, so we go with 3 years. And Hezekiah is the king at that time, right? So he witnesses this along with the rest of Israel, mainly the southern kingdom here. And the king of Assyria did carry away Israel unto Assyria, and put them in Halah and in Habor by the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord Yahweh their God, but transgressed his covenant, and all that Moses the servant of the Lord Yahweh commanded, and would not hear them, nor do them. And so that's what they got. That was the judgment for disobeying the commandments of the Lord. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. Now when you look into secular history, you see a succession of kings from Shalmaneser V to Sargon to Sennacherib. And you might see the timelines over there and say, well, by the time, right, if we look at the time frame here, we're hearing mention of Shalmaneser during the 6th year of Hezekiah, right? And then in his 14th year, Sennacherib comes up. And you'll say, well, if Sargon ruled after Shalmaneser and Sargon ruled for, a decent amount of time, wouldn't it have been Sargon who came here at this time? And in fact, let's take a look here. It actually just came back to my mind. So let's look at Sargon II. And we can also pull up his successor, which was also his son, Sennacherib. So let's see, Sennacherib as crown prince. It says here, as crown prince, Sennacherib exercised royal power with his father, or alone as substitute while Sargon was away campaigning. During Sargon's longer absences from the Assyrian heartland, Sennacherib's residence would have served as the center of government in the Neo-Assyrian Empire, with the crown prince taking on significant administrative and political responsibilities. The vast responsibilities entrusted to Sennacherib suggests a certain degree of trust between the king and the crown prince. In reliefs depicting both Sargon and Sennacherib, they are portrayed in discussion, appearing almost as equals. As regent, Sennacherib's primary duty was to maintain relations with Assyrian governors and generals and oversee the empire's vast military intelligence work or network. And then it talks a bit more about what he did and so on. Let me actually take a look down here. A letter to his father indicates that Sennacherib respected him and that they were on friendly terms. He never disobeyed his father, and his letters indicate he knew Sargon well and wanted to please him. For unknown reasons, Sargon never took him on his military campaigns. Alayi believes that Sennacherib may have resented his father for this, as he missed out on the glory attached to military victories. Cool stuff. Now I want to see War in the Levant. Okay. I don't want to read all this here. But we know that Sennacherib ends up coming against us, as we're about to read. And I'm sure it's probably listed in here somewhere around what time that happened. So maybe it is after he officially became king and he succeeded his father. Maybe it was while he was crown prince, but more than likely the former than the latter. Either or, the point here is, you may say, well, the time period where Sennacherib comes to become king, right? He starts to reign. They place his reign right around 705 BC, right? And the siege of the siege of Samaria ends around 722 BC, right? So that's about what? That's about 705 to 720, which is 15, but 722 would bring this down to about 13 years or so, right? So if they place Sennacherib's reign around 13 years later, we see in the book of Kings here that it says Sennacherib came up against Hezekiah not even 13 years after the siege, right? But I bring out these points to sort of emphasize the original point that I mentioned, which is when you go through these accounts and you look at the secular history and so on, it's always important to keep in mind that when you're dealing with secular history or extra biblical sources, dates can be a very tricky thing, okay? Because a lot of it is approximations and circa, and so trying to go down a rabbit hole to pinpoint exact dates and match them up, you may end up confusing yourself or getting into a deadlock, right? Well, the scriptures say this, but in the secular history it says this. So what? At the end of the day, the point here is to understand what was going on here, right? Knowing the exact time of this guy, I mean, it helps sometimes, right, if it's accurate, but it doesn't really do too much, on that front, okay? Because our faith is already in the words of the Heavenly Father, right? So what that means is the Bible reigns supreme. So back to the context of 2 Kings, the 18th chapter, we're now here at the point where Sennacherib comes up, right? As it says here, the king of Assyria comes up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. So Lachish and all these other cities that we owned, he came and basically took them over. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended, return from me. That which thou puttest on me will I bear. Meaning, I rebelled. Yes, I offended, but return from me, meaning like retreat, take your armies back, and whatever tribute, whatever amount you put on us, we'll pay it. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord Yahweh and in the treasures of the king's house. At that time did Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord Yahweh, and from the pillars which Hezekiah king of Judah had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah with a great host against Jerusalem. So he sent them. You can imagine these guys being some high-ranking officials or generals in his army. So he sends them with this large host, this army, against Jerusalem. And they went up and came to Jerusalem. And when they were come up, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is in the highway of the fuller's field. Now, the conduit is really just a passage of water, like irrigation. If you look up conduit, you'll see something like this, like pipes, for example. And these allow water or some other form of something to travel from one place to another, right? So, well, these are metal conduits here, but you can see here it says it's a channel for conveying water or other fluid. Likewise, you can use one for electricity and so on. So you can imagine the conduit here being some pathway by which water is flowing, as it says, of the upper pool, right? So yeah, they had pools. You can look up Hezekiah's tunnel, which was similar in the sense of it was a pathway built to allow water to flow inward in case of a siege. If they couldn't go outside, it was like a internal tunnel, that was built to allow that water to travel there. In fact, I can briefly look it up here. Hezekiah tunnel, or the Siloam tunnel. You can see that here. It says the newer Siloam tunnel, also known as Hezekiah's tunnel, is a water tunnel that was carved within the city of David in ancient times, located in the modern-day Palestinian neighborhood of Silwan in eastern Jerusalem. The latter name comes from its theorized origin under the reign of King Hezekiah of Judah. Let me see here. In the late 8th and early 7th century BC, and corresponds to the conduit mentioned in 2 Kings 20 in the Tanakh. According to the Tanakh, King Hezekiah prepared Jerusalem for an impending siege by the Assyrians by quote-unquote blocking the source of waters of the upper Gihon and leading them straight down on the west to the city of David. By diverting the waters of the Gihon, he prevented the enemy forces under Sennacherib from gaining access to water. An old water system, sometimes called the Siloam Channel, partly fulfilled a similar purpose and dates back to the Canaanites. So this is one example here, right, with Hezekiah's tunnel. And I guess to more accurately describe it, it was to channel water away to one, deter the Assyrians. But here there's some more information here, and this I believe is what I remembered. It says the tunnel leads from the Gihon Spring to the Pool of Siloam, which is, it says here, it's located southeast of the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. If indeed built under Hezekiah, it dates to a time when Jerusalem was preparing for an impending siege by the Assyrians led by Sennacherib. Since the Gihon Spring was already protected by a massive tower and was included in the city's defensive wall system, Jerusalem seems to have been supplied with enough water in case of siege, even without this tunnel. So it was like another measure of having that water there. And then there's more about it. You can read on that if you would like, but there's a bit of context for you. So you had here these Tartan, Rabsaris, Rabshakeh, they pull up, right, as it says here, and they stood by the pool, by the conduit, the pathway of the upper pool, which is in the highway of the Fuller's Field. Now, when you actually look up the Fuller's Field, or even just Fuller's, I typed it in here. It says here, Fuller's Field was a field near Jerusalem, where fullers washed, whitened, and dyed clothes, like a laundromat. The name comes from the Hebrew word Sedhe Kovs, which is likely not pronounced this way, but which means washerman's field. Located on the west side of the highway outside of Jerusalem, close to the upper pool at the head of the Hinnom Valley. Now, taking a look here at Fuller's, it says, a person who cleaned, whitened, bleached, thickened, shrunk, or dyed cloth, right? So similar to like a washer, right? A washing machine, but they weren't machines, of course, but this was their form, right? When you go to certain countries, it's not all of them that have washers and dryers, right? You would actually hand wash certain things. You know, you would have your soap, you know, you would hand wash it. In some places you smack the clothes against like this rock, you know, and then once it's clean, you can then hang it on some like wire or something and then let it sun dry. Okay. It says fullers cared for newly shorn wool or woven garments. The process of fulling often involved washing with lye and cleansing by pressure. So there's some context on the fullers and what the Fuller's Field was for. And when they had called to the king, there came out to them Eliakim. So now at this point, these guys, these generals, they've come with their army, and they're calling out for Hezekiah. So Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, which was over the house, and Shibna, the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder. And the recorder is one that, like a journalist, in the sense that he records the events, what's going on. And Rabshakeh said unto them, Speak ye now to Hezekiah, thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria, what confidence is this wherein thou trustest? Thou sayest, but they be but vain words. I have counsel and strength of the war. Now on whom dost thou trust, that thou rebellest against me? So he's basically speaking in the like instead of Sennacherib, right? So he's saying, hey, where are you getting this confidence from? That you rebelling against me? Do you not know that I'm like the top dog in this whole region? Now behold, thou trustest upon the staff of this bruised reed, even upon Egypt, on which if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, unto all that trust on him. But if ye say unto me, we trust in the Lord Yahweh our God, is not that he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and hath said to Judah and Jerusalem, Ye shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem. So in other words, you say you serve the God. Now keep in mind that these Assyrians, they're speaking, especially in this sense, generally, right? They don't really know the God that we serve. So he's saying, Isn't this the God that Hezekiah just destroyed all his altars and groves and so on and so forth, saying that you're going to have to worship him at just one altar in Jerusalem? Little did they know that that's really what the Lord requires, right? Anyway, now therefore I pray thee, give pledges to my Lord King of Assyria, and I will deliver 2,000 horses, or deliver thee 2,000 horses, if thou be able on thy part to set riders upon them. And you can imagine at this point he's mixing in a bit of like taunting, right? To say like, you guys are so weak, right? Do you even have any horsemen? Do you even have enough to be able to if I gave you 2,000 horses, to be able to have people that can even ride them, whether it's a lack of skill or a lack of whatever? How then wilt thou turn away the face of one captain, or turn away the face of one captain of the least of my master's servants, and put thy trust on Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Am I now come up without the Lord Yahweh against this place to destroy it? In fact, the Lord said unto me, go up against this land and destroy it. Now, when you look up in the Hebrew, the word there is Yahweh. And by him saying Yahweh, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Most High actually, spoke to him, right? And said, yeah, go and destroy Jerusalem, right? It could have been, but not necessarily. One possibility here would have been he's being, I don't even know if facetious is the right word to use here, but once again, in a taunting manner, right? Like, you trusting in your God so much. Well, guess what? That same God told me to come destroy this place, and know for sure that, guess what? That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna tear this place up, tore up from the floor up. Anyway, then said Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shibna, and Joah, unto Rabshakeh, speak, I pray thee, to thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it. And talk not with us in the Jews' language in the ears of the people that are on the wall. So they didn't want necessarily to spread panic or fear throughout the Israelites with all this that's going on. But Rabshakeh said unto them, hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee, to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall, that they may eat their own dung and drink their own piss with you? And what that means is, do you think that Sennacherib sent me to just come and like keep this low key between just you and Hezekiah? Nah, I'm here to let everybody know here that, if you guys don't submit, we're pretty much going to starve you out. When he says eat your own dung and drink your own piss, in the sense of, you're going to be starved out and put in such a bad position that's what you're going to have to come down to, right? It's just another way of saying that you're going to be in a bad position. And maybe more particularly towards whether being besieged, right, or being destroyed and lack of resources and just a great deal of desperation. Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language, and spake, saying, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you out of his hand. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord Yahweh, saying, Yahweh will surely deliver us, and this city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Hearken not to Hezekiah, oh, hearken not to Hezekiah. For thus saith the king of Assyria, make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me. And then eat ye every man of his own vine, and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one of the waters of his cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive oil, or oil olive, and of honey,
that ye may live and not die. And hearken not unto Hezekiah, when he persuadeth you, saying, The Lord will deliver us. Hath any of the gods of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? I mean, look around you. Where were the gods of Hamath, or of Arpad? Where were the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Eva? Have they delivered Samaria out of mine hand? And who are they among all the gods of the countries that have delivered their country out of mine hand, that the Lord Yahweh should deliver Jerusalem out of mine hand? But the people held their peace, and answered him not a word. For the king's commandment was, saying, Answer him not. Then came Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shibna the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph the recorder, to Hezekiah with their clothes rent, and told him the words of Rabshakeh. So that brings us to the end of the book of 2 Kings, the 18th chapter, and you can see here, right, this tactic of really trying to, put fear into the people, in the hopes that, at the very least, even if Hezekiah still stands firm, his people would turn on him, right, and say like, yeah, you know what, the odds are not looking good. We don't really want to go against these Assyrians. Let's just give in. And sometimes you have cases like that, right, where the people are like, look, we'll submit to you. We don't want to follow this king anymore. There's too much. We don't want to have to go through this. So we'll submit over here. And so he taunts, he boasts. He said, look, the heathens, which, to us, right, they're heathens. But the heathens in the lands all about, the ones that we put in the lands of Samaria, they have their gods. They perform their different rites and rituals. And which one of those was not subjected and put down by us? And you think you're so special that your God is going to be the one to deliver you? Look around you, right? Wake up and smell the coffee. And that's basically like this angle and this narrative in which was being pushed over here. So, like I said, we're now at the end of 2 Kings, the 18th chapter. Let's see what ends up happening here, right? And remember, as it says in the book of Wisdom of Solomon, for when men would not believe that thou art of a full power, thy makest that power manifest, right? I believe, roughly paraphrasing, it's something along those lines. Anyway, with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Hudash. And until next time, Shalom.